So welcome everybody. Welcome. It is absolutely wonderful to have you here. I'm Adam Falk. I'm the president of Williams. And we're going to have a little bit of time together to talk about what's to come. I'm going to go ahead and pre-introduce everyone who's going to speak after me. We'll have Leticia Haynes, just kind of working our way down the row, who's the Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity. Steve Klass, the Vice President for Campus Life. Marlene Sandstrom, the Dean of the College, and then Rick Spalding, our chaplain to the college. So it's a beautiful, beautiful day today. It's a day that feels like the campus is just showing off for all of you. But I actually would like to take a moment, a serious moment, to reflect just on what's going on in Houston and South Texas, where the day is not nearly so beautiful. And we're thinking about our colleagues who are there and the families, the Williams families who are there in Houston, and just wishing them safety and health, and certainly are going to do everything we can to help any student who's affected by that unfolding tragedy. So, you know, even in the midst of something wonderful, we have to think a little more broadly about the world that we're in. So my own daughter went off to college 3 years ago. And that, you know, she's starting her senior year, and that, you know, 3 years from now, that will seem impossible to you, how quickly those 3 years and then the 4 years pass. But I do remember what you're experiencing. It was a really surreal day, particularly if it's your first, and I know for many of you it's not your first, but for many of you it's your first. Your children, our students, are starting a journey, one of the most important journeys of their lives. I mean, they're arriving today with all respect to who they are as adolescents. It's overgrown adolescents. And in 4 years, 3 years and 9 months, we're going to say goodbye to them, and they're really going to be adults. And so a lot that's going to happen here in Williams. And I think it's a moment I'd like to reflect on what's important about that. And they will get larger and older. We can guarantee they will get older. But what else is going to happen here? So what do? We bring students here for 4 years, and our goal is to provide them really a comprehensive educational and developmental experience that produces graduates who are effective in their own lives and are effective in the world. The impact of Williams, the impact of any college education, but certainly of Williams, takes a long time to develop while they're here, and it takes an even longer time to develop after they graduate. I meet a lot of alumni, a lot of people whose Williams experience was 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And what they say is that it takes that long for the impact of what they experience here, for the skills they acquire, the understanding of the world that they develop, to play out fully in their lives. It's about adaptation. Jack Sawyer, who was the president here in the 60s, described a liberal arts education as the most practical education you can receive. And what we want above all else for your students, for your children, is that they learn not just a whole lot of things, but that they learn how to adapt to the world that's going to change more in their lives after Williams than it has even changed in ours. It is not just, or even at all, about their starting salary when they walk out into their first job. So Williams, how do we do that? I mean, you've probably heard people talk a whole lot about the college by now, and you're here, so I know you're sold, or at least your kids were sold. Maybe some of you are thinking, really? Why'd they choose this place? The weather's too nice. The college has been defined, and is defined, by great faculty and the experience the students have in the classroom with faculty, and of course have more broadly with adult mentors across the campus. And you know, we live a little bit by the people we live our values a little bit by the people we most remember. And so I want to say a word about 3 iconic faculty from the history of the college and what they teach us and what they teach us to remember. The first of them is Mark Hopkins. He was the president for what seems to me an impossible length of time, like 35 years. Back in the 19th century. And from his time here came kind of the most iconic metaphor that we have here, which is that of the logs. Let me say a word about that. You've probably heard of the log, at least you've seen the restaurant down on Spring Street that's called the log. You'll hear a lot of it. So where'd that come from? So James Garfield, who is the only Williams grad ever to become president and assassinated early in his presidency, actually eulogized a few years ago in the Washington Post as the greatest president we never had. because he was really an extraordinary figure, and you can it's a wonderful biography of him by Candace Millard called Destiny of the Republic that I encourage you all to read. He was at an alumni event in Washington during Hopkins' presidency, in New York, excuse me. And the alumni were complaining, as sometimes I'm told they do, that the facilities were not good enough. And this building was falling down, and that building wasn't big enough, and I don't know what else the problems were. But Garfield stood up, and this is during the presidency of the great teacher Mark Hopkins, and he said, "The greatest college is Mark Hopkins on one end of a log and a student on the other." And of course, the point he was making was obvious, that all of the things we do around that interaction are there just to support that interaction. But if the interaction between students and faculty is the very center of what you think about, then you're going to have a great college. And so the first thing we are going to encourage your children to do is to form relationships with faculty. If you want to ask them one nosy question this fall, and we're generally discouraging that, but one, ask them if they've gotten to know a faculty member and to tell you about that faculty member and about that relationship, because we really encourage that. The second faculty member I'd mention is a guy named Bob Gaudino, who was in political science here in the early 60s, the 60s and the early 70s. And the thing that he was certainly not the only person who valued this, but the thing that we associate with Gaudino is the notion of uncomfortable learning. The idea that a certain amount of discomfort is necessary to the kind of challenging learning that we most value. And what he meant by that in his case was getting students out of the comfortable situations they were in. He actually sent students, when it was not popular to do that, he sent people to rural India, because he knew that those students would be just shaken out of everything that they thought they believed by being in such a different environment. But of course, that extends to so much of what we do. We want to get students out of the places that they feel comfortable, so that they think new things, and so that they think deeply about their own relationship to the world. And that's another deep value. And we think about Gaudino, they'll hear his name a lot. There's a Gaudino Scholar and a Gaudino Fund. That's what we're thinking about. And the third person I'll mention is James McGregor Burns, who recently deceased in his 90s, and he was actually a Williams graduate from the 30s. He was here teaching for decades. He was a political scientist who wrote great biographies political biographies of Kennedy and so forth. And that is the scholar teacher. And he was a great scholar as well as a great teacher. And the point there is we want our faculty and everyone here not to, as devoted as they are to teaching, to not forget their larger intellectual lives, because faculty who are scholars and deeply enmeshed in that can bring that to their students and can bring that kind of developing sense of their field into the classroom freshly over the decades that they teach here. So this is an intellectual place, and we have intellectual faculty and I think that combination of intellectual faculty who are committed to students is what makes Williams really special. So our role here, what we want to do above all else, is expose students to new ideas, expose them to new directions, especially those students who think they already know what they want to do. So the other thing you can do for us is try to get them to forget what it is they think they know that they want to do, because we want to challenge them. The odds are the thing they really want to do is something they haven't heard of yet, because they've only been to high school, and there's a lot more here. So we really want to expose them to new things. College is not a transaction. It's not a transactional approach that, I'm going to collect these classes, I'm going to collect these grades, I'm going to collect this GPA, and I'll put it on a piece of paper, and it's going to get me my next thing. And, that's the way a lot of our society thinks about a college education these days. That's not how we think about it. It's a set of experiences that are way more important than the transcripts. And they don't have no way of knowing which of those experiences are going to inform their lives further down the road. So that kind of moving away from the notion that and I'll come back to this, that you're purchasing a college education is, I think, really important. We also want to expose them to new people. That is, it is simply a demographic fact about our society that most students come from high schools that are not nearly as diverse as Williams, and are going to go into lives after Williams, in which, again, the people there around are not as diverse as the extraordinary diversity of students that we have here. And we really insist that students, challenge themselves to take the best advantage of that. The greatest change of Williams over the last decades, the most important, the most wonderful, is this growing diversity on every dimension: gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual expression and LGBT status, class, citizenship. And every single student who we admitted belongs here completely, belongs here deeply. Everyone we've admitted can thrive here and should thrive here, and we will do everything we can to give them every opportunity to thrive here. And everyone here, every single student, benefits from the rich diversity that the campus represents. That can have its challenges as well, and we embrace those challenges. I want to say a word about that. We have robust campus discourse here at Williams. We have robust debate over controversial issues, and that's incredibly important to have in a college environment. And look at the speakers who've come here, you see this. These are controversial issues that are ancient ones and contemporary ones. How should we tax ourselves? How should we take care of those in our society who are sick and of those in our society who are poor? How should we deal humanely with the challenges that are posed by immigration? My own parents are immigrants. How should our country engage internationally? And how should we choose our allies? So these are all controversial issues on which there's a wide diversity of opinion in our society, and we want students to engage with these kinds of controversial issues and challenge themselves with approaches to them that they may not be familiar with or comfortable with. But I want to say that there is a proposition that is not up for academic debate here at Williams. And that's a question of whether every member of our society and every member of our community is of equal value. That is not something that we're going to be debating as if it were an academic question on the college. That is not a partisan statement, and it's not a statement about which there are many sides. Everybody in our community, just as everyone in our society, has equal value. And while we're having these complicated discussions about important controversial issues, we're going to hold that value deeply, and we're going to hold our students to that value deeply because it is a core value of this college. So there's a moral dimension to how we engage with each other. And it brings me back to this observation I made before, that students are not customers of Williams. It's not a commercial relationship. When we bring students in, we're bringing them into a community, and we're asking themselves to bring their entire selves into that community and to contribute productively, to engage, to challenge themselves, because they have to give that to that community, our community, so that they can take that from our community as well. And so it's not just, you're not buying something, we're all in it. It's a moral and ethical relationship, and that is what makes it so wonderful. That's what makes it so wonderful to study here. It's what makes it so wonderful to work here. So lastly, a word to you as parents who are about to say goodbye. You're starting a journey too, and I would just ask you to give your children the time and the space to become who they're going to be, and help them to embrace the great variety of what Williams has to offer. Every student here is going to have moments of success, and they're going to have moments of difficulty. I can guarantee it for every single student who is starting here today. So celebrate the one with them, the successes, and support them through their difficulties here. They, and whatever happens, they and you are now forever part of the Williams family. And so thank you for joining our family, and thank you above everything else for sharing your children with us. Welcome to Williams.
Welcome, families. It's a privilege to stand here before you. As Adam said, today I am Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity at Williams. But just over 20 years ago, my parents drove me to Williamstown and sat where you're sitting today. So I'm an extremely proud graduate of the class of 1999 of this institution. And Williams was pretty great then, but it is pretty phenomenal now. So when offered the opportunity to come back and President Falk hired me, there was no question that I would return. I yearn to give back to this institution because Williams College is truly a place where everyone, regardless of who they are or perceived to be, can live, learn, and thrive. As Vice President, I work strategically with all community stakeholders and constituents, including students, faculty, staff, alumni, to name a few, to ensure that this place is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. I help guide efforts to conceptualize, define, assess, nurture, and cultivate diversity as an institutional and educational resource and priority. Every person in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Equity works to ensure that all students, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation or identity, economic or ability status, have meaningful access to all of the college's resources. Here are two examples. The Davis Center. In partnership with students, faculty, staff, alumni, and off-campus communities, it strives to facilitate collaboration, dialogue, and explorations for social change to create an inclusive environment for learning, living, and community. Second, the Office for Special Academic Programs and Support aims to ensure all students thrive academically at Williams and beyond through opportunities and programs such as research fellowships that work to eradicate racial and economic disparities in higher education. So have no doubt that if your child needs anything, our doors are wide open. In the most wonderful Williams way, all of the offices here, including the Dean of the College's office and the Vice President for Campus Life's office, and many others, work closely and diligently to ensure that our students have an optimal experience, so that throughout their tenure here, they engage in critical discourse, thoughtful discourse, and respectful discourse. And there's no question that some of that discourse will involve or surround issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I say that Williams is phenomenal today, it is because we are intentional about what we do. Today, as we develop programs and coordinate curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities to be more diverse and inclusive, we have his story, her story, and their story as powerful guides. You may know that during the first 175 plus years of its existence, there were no women on the college campus. When women arrived on campus in the 1970s, there were very few of them, and there are very few students of color. But today, more than 40 years later, Williams embraces strategic efforts to ensure that its classrooms are diverse with students and faculty of different races, ethnicities, genders, to name a few. Consider the fact that Williams has approximately 8% international students, 40% US students of color, nearly half of the students identify as men and half as women, and about 16% or more first-generation students, and about half the student body receiving financial aid. There's no question that Williams' commitment to diversity is staunch. As I close, I add that I do not assume that we all share the same understanding and definition of diversity. So when I say diversity, know that when I say diversity, know that Williams strives for identity diversity, what we may look like, and cognitive diversity, how we may think. We believe that diversity and exceptional go hand in hand. A great school requires exceptional people, perspectives, and problem solving. A great school benefits from including people with diverse perspectives. Differences in identity, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, physical ability, sex identity and orientation, economic status correlate with cognitive diversity. This week, as the first-year class joins the community, it really does come to life. The people behind the papers, the essays, and applications are here. Their presence will be seen and felt across campus, and we know that each member of this class is unique and brings with them diversity in thought and being. And for that, we are extremely, extremely grateful. So once again, welcome to Williams College. I hope you enjoy your short, brief stay. And I will now turn it over to my colleague, Steve Klass, who is Vice President for Campus Life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leticia, and welcome, families. Congratulations. I've been in your shoes 3 times, and so I know it's, as Adam said, kind of surreal, a lot of mixed emotions. I find that lots of regular, deep cleansing breaths is really helpful. So while you're exhaling, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some of the guiding principles and goals that we share in support of student campus life here on campus. Altogether, just the folks on the stage, Leticia, Marlene, Rick, and myself represent over 250 colleagues who comprise a comprehensive and tightly woven network of student support across campus. I hope you've had the chance to meet several of them today at Peresky or wherever your wanderings have taken you on this. You know, the weather's always like this here. So that's our little secret we'll let you in on now that you're part of the family. Collectively, our aim is that all students will thrive academically, socially, and emotionally, and that they'll be fully engaged as constructive and healthy members of this welcoming community. And as a first principle in support of their holistic well-being, we focus on ensuring that no matter what's going on in their lives, they know that there are no wrong doors for them to walk through when they're seeking help with something, where they have a question, a concern, an issue that's troubling them, that there are no wrong doors here on campus. And just as importantly, we want you and your students to know that we provide access to critical services 24/7 during the academic year. Marlene's going to talk about those services in greater detail in a moment, but I just want to repeat those two key points. 24/7 access to critical services, whether on or off campus, and no wrong doors to walk through in order to access them. As Vice President for Campus Life, I'm responsible for working closely with a wide range of amazing student affairs professionals in religious and spiritual life, health and well-being, campus safety, community engagement, housing, dining, and our student activities areas. Just a great range of folks, as well as with other offices that we've talked about today. But I want to caution that when we describe our work with students this way, that's just an organizational convenience. We don't think about who reports where in order to divide things up. But we are focused on every day how we can invest these remarkable resources of people, facilities, and programs broadly in the service of student success. Because first and foremost, we're a community, and our shared concept of community informs every aspect of our work. And as a community, one of our greatest attributes is our scale. We're large enough to make these significant investments in talented, deeply experienced student affairs professionals. But at the same time, our small scale as a campus community allows us to develop the kinds of interpersonal relationships that really make the Williams experience so uniquely personal. We're so much more effective at taking care of one another when we really know each other and when we make ourselves available with as few barriers to access as possible. Again, no wrong doors. In addition to community support, we also view student thriving through the lens of co-curricular engagement. Making the most of one's entire college experience starts by recognizing the critically important connection between students' co-curricular experiences and their development of emotional intelligence. Our philosophy of nurturing heart, mind, body, and spirit underscores the model of holistic well-being that we seek for all of our students. And to that end, we provide myriad opportunities for students to pursue their artistic passions, to feed their spiritual selves, to identify and fine-tune their leadership skills, and to serve in the broader Berkshire community and globally as well, to take care of themselves and each other, emotionally and physically, including, and I know this sounds impossible, but including taking time to slow down and being mindful of their own well-being. We firmly believe that the intellectual growth and emotional development we seek to engender are produced both inside and outside the classroom. We aspire for our programs and services to provide the intellectual and emotional space for students to develop their own identities fearlessly and safely, to embrace the diversity of backgrounds and ideas to which they're being introduced, to adapt to campus culture and thrive away from home, and to feed their intellectual curiosity by becoming active listeners and socially mature problem solvers. At Williams, your students are going to work hard, produce much, and have multiple opportunities to engage fully. And within this context, we want students to view their well-being as a core competency that they hold along with everything else they're learning. To that end, we seek to develop a robust array of services, education, and practices where rigor and vigor are mutually supportive, and to ensure that students learn to excel at both at Williams. Our work is predicated on the belief that these next 4 years will be among the most transformative in your students' lives. And today, they're taking important first steps on their own journeys in their first entry meetings, immersing themselves in their new communities, sharing expectations, being introduced to campus culture, and meeting new people from all over the world. It's important to recognize, as Adam said, that this relentless process of learning and analyzing and reassessing their own beliefs is going to bring some challenges along the way, quite possibly challenges neither your student nor yourselves have had to face before. And I can say with confidence that everyone requires some form of assistance with some aspect of their college experience sooner or later. And we can say with equal confidence that help is available here on campus or through other campus resources. And we really want all students to get to know our highly accessible people right away, and we hope that you'll help us encourage them to do so. The earlier the better, hopefully before something actually becomes a problem. So today, as they merge on the on-ramp of independence, if you're like my wife and me in all three of the cases with our sons, the most challenging part of all of this is for you to allow your daughter or son to manage their own way through these challenges in their time here. It's really hard, but it's critically important that we do it. And as they find their own voices, experiment with new identities, gain their footing as members of this new and ever-changing community, they're going to need space and they're going to need grace. It's our aspiration that all of our students will thrive as resilient, productive, engaged, and empathic members of the Williams community for the next 4 years, and in their families and communities beyond that for the rest of their lives. Thank you very much for sharing them with us. Marlene?
Hello, everybody. I'd like to add my welcome and my congratulations. We are very thrilled to have your young people here with us. There's a big ramp up of excitement between the moment that your students say yes to Williams and when they arrive on campus and they bring such energy and vitality. We are thrilled that they're here. So right now, what they are doing is settling into their entries. They're getting to know their junior advisors and the other students that they're going to be living with in their home base, their entry, for the year. And as part of that settling in process, they're going to have the opportunity to get to know people who are different in all sorts of ways from the people that they've grown up with. And that really is a core part of the magic of this place. And we're very excited about the ways in which this incredible group of new students are going to grow and learn from each other. We also know that students come to Williams with a real richness of character that comes from their families and their home communities. And Williams is a better place because of the ways that your family's experiences and perspectives and values and traditions are going to contribute to the community that all of the students build here at Williams. So thank you for building the students that are going to help build our community here at Williams. We know that it's a really exciting time for families, and at the same time, it's a challenging one, and you may have questions or concerns about how your students are going to fare. So I thought I'd just say a little bit about some key supports, flesh out a little bit of what Steve Klass mentioned. If you have questions about anything that I raise or anything that I don't raise, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Our website has all kinds of information. It'll give you directory assistance about who you can contact. But I did want to mention one really easy, handy portal of entry, which is the email address families@williams.edu. And if you look in the back, Rob White is standing back there. There he is. Rob is our Director of Parent and Family Programming. He is the man behind that email address. There's a real person there. Rob has sent 3 children through Williams, so he is an incredibly knowledgeable Williams parent. And you can send him questions about anything, and he will make sure that those questions go to the right people who can give you the most direct and relevant answer to those questions. So families@williams.edu. So first, let me just say a word about healthcare. The college has a student health and wellness service that includes a broad array of providers. We have nurses, nurse practitioners, health educators, physicians, as well as psychological counseling professionals. Visits to all of those healthcare professionals are free and they are unlimited. Williams is unusual in that way compared to other colleges, and certainly it's unusual compared to the way that insurance works out in the real world. But we are able to provide students with the care that they need without worrying about session limits. The health center has hours on weekends as well as weekdays, and students can arrive to be seen as drop-ins or with appointments. There's also an on-call number for off-hours crises of any kind. And of course, we can transport students to local hospitals or coordinate care with local specialists if the need arises. If you have particular concerns about how your student is going to manage a current or an ongoing health issue, you are welcome to contact the Student Health and Wellness Center just in advance to have a chat with the staff there to let them know what your concerns are, and they'd be really happy to talk to you about that. Second, I wanted to mention safety. Our campus safety and security department is open, as Steve mentioned, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our director of campus safety is standing right in the back, Dave Boyer, can raise his hand. Our officers maintain the security of the campus, and they make it their business to get to know the students really well. One piece of advice you could give your students is if they have a chance to introduce themselves to a campus safety officer, they should take the opportunity to do it. I cannot tell you how many times alumni come back to campus, not just to visit faculty members that have been really important to them, but to visit with the folks from campus safety who they've developed really close relationships during their time here at Williams. So students often talk about how CSS helps them with problems both big and small. I asked Dave to give me an estimate of how many students may have already had contact with campus safety just in the short time they've been here, and he told me about 50, and I'm wondering if you could guess why 50 students would already be in touch with campus safety. Any guesses? Locked out of the dorm room. So that's already happened about 50 times. Campus safety always helps with letting students back into the room. And then there are the larger problems when students are really have a concern where they need transport or they're in a crisis and they need immediate support. And campus safety is there for them, ranging from the big to the small. They are an amazing group of people who care tremendously about the students that they work with every day. Your students, even though they've only been here for a few hours, already knows one key fact, and that is that campus safety is the number to call for any kind of immediate trouble. That's that number that they probably already know by heart is 597-4444. Our dispatcher can immediately find health services, psychological services, the dean on call, and anybody else that a student might need day or night every day of the year. That is true for our students. That's also true for you. If your student calls you and you have the sense that they're in some kind of immediate trouble, you can call that number, call campus safety, let them know what your student has conveyed, and they will immediately get the student hooked up with the resources that they need. I want to mention one more support that may seem counterintuitive to you, and that is our academic resources. Of course, your students are here at Williams because they've been incredibly successful in academics throughout their time in school. So why academic resources? It turns out that every Williams student, at one time or another, looks to academic resources to help hone and strengthen their skills, both generally and for particular courses. Our students do this across all 4 years and for all kinds of reasons. There are study skills workshops, there are peer tutors that are available, we offer writing tutors. There's a math science resource center, which is staffed by students who are expert in different courses in the math and science fields. We have students who are looking for guidance about accessibility accommodations, advice about fellowships, advice about how and when to think about study abroad experiences. Seeking out academic resources is what strong students do to get even stronger here. So I encourage you to encourage your students to make use of those resources early and often. And please encourage your students to make close connections to one of the most valuable resources we have here on campus, and that is their professors. If you hear from your sons or daughters that they're struggling with a course, and you will hear that they're losing confidence in their abilities, that they're feeling overwhelmed by their workload, remind them, first of all, that that's entirely normal, that most students experience that in the first couple of weeks, and if not, at some point during their first year. That feeling overwhelmed at first is really par for the course. And there's not a person in this room who has not experienced a crisis of confidence at one point or another. The other thing to tell them that is a great moment to reach out to their professors. I'm a faculty member. I've been a member of the psychology department since 1999, so I can say with confidence that our faculty members choose to be here at Williams because they want to be at a place that puts undergraduates at the very center of the universe. They are incredibly passionate about their students. They're passionate about their research, their scholarship, and they are equally passionate about their students. And we want students to know that. So when students have the instinct to avoid their professors, when they feel worried or concerned or overwhelmed, we really want them to do exactly the opposite. That is a great time for them to come to talk to their professors. There's a lot more in terms of support that the college offers, but I want to just take a moment to focus on a theme that runs through all of the different types of support that we offer, and that has to do with helping students assume an increasingly higher level of personal responsibility for themselves. Responsibility for setting goals, for making choices, for taking the initiative in terms of even thinking about what resources they want to take advantage of. So a major aim for the next 4 years is to help our students become more independent on all of those dimensions. And all of our offices work really hard to scaffold that development. I'm going to use the example of our Student Health and Wellness Center. As adults, we know that managing the healthcare system can be daunting, and many of you have been involved in helping your sons and daughters negotiate their healthcare up until now, and you may be wondering how they're going to manage that on their own. Our health center is really designed to be user-friendly and to actually help teach students how to manage their own health care. We have a drop-in service where students can get immediate help just figuring out how sick they are, whether they're sick enough to be seen, whether they just need some advice, or whether they might need something more than that. So students who have questions, who just aren't really even sure what they need, are welcome to come in, sit down with staff at the Health and Wellness Center, and get some education about the kinds of questions to ask themselves to figure out what they need. That's a way of helping students sort of learn to begin to manage their own health care. Talking to professors about their concerns is another way in which we encourage students to take on more personal initiative. Often students who are struggling come to the dean's office to work with one of the deans, and we're really thrilled when they come to talk to us. And often what they're worried about is their workload. They are not ready to turn a paper in on time, they're not prepared for an exam, and they're looking for some help in terms of an extension of some sort. And the first thing that we do is try to help the students figure out how to reach out to faculty members and have that communication themselves. Sometimes that means sitting down with the student and role-playing what that conversation will be like, giving them some sample language of how they might reach out to faculty members. But rather than doing it for them, we're really encouraging students to figure out how to have those conversations and make those connections themselves. Another piece of independence and sense of agency that we're hoping to bolster has to do with your young people's right to privacy and confidentiality. So as college students, they now have legal ownership of their academic and their personal and their medical records, which is another big transition both for students and for parents. We cannot legally call you when your son or daughter comes to the health center for routine care, or to a dean for help with an academic or a relationship problem, or to campus safety about a bit of trouble that needs to be straightened out. Giving students ownership of their own experience is an important part of the transition to college life. That said, we will certainly reach out to parents when students are in danger. If there is a major health or any other major crisis, we will call you, or better yet, help your student get in touch with you directly. But most of the time, students are making their own decisions about what information to share and when they want to reach out for advice. So grappling with those choices is really important. It's part of the process of your sons and daughters learning to manage stressors, make reasoned decisions, and just to step up as responsible young adults, which are all good things that are going to prepare them to make their way not just here at Williams, but after Williams. That's a goal that we all share. Your students will make mistakes. Of course they will. Some of them already have by locking themselves out of their room. I hope that they're going to make more mistakes because figuring out how to move on from a mistake, that transition from the moment when you realize you have screwed up to the next one when you start problem solving is something that they're going to be repeating in all kinds of different permutations throughout their personal and professional lives. I brought along something that I keep in my office, which I'm sure you can't see from the back. It says, no matter, try again, fail better. And I keep that there because it's a reminder to me and to everyone who comes in that mistakes are expected, they're also crucial, and most of the time, the mistake matters much less than the thing that you choose to do next. So making mistakes means that students are making decisions, and as long as those decisions are becoming more reasoned, more responsible, more thoughtful, more ethical, more community-minded over time, then we are all moving in the right direction. So again, thank you for bringing all of these phenomenal young people here to our campus. We are so excited to spend time with them and to be a part of this incredible new chapter in their lives.
I add my welcome. I'm sure you've heard the old joke about the tourist who's visiting New York City for the first time, wandering around feeling more than a little lost and overwhelmed while searching for a particular destination. Finally, this tourist's disorientation brings him just to a standstill on the sidewalk, scratching his head, when suddenly, looking around him, he sees hurrying toward him a person carrying a violin case. The lost stranger's face brightens as the musician approaches. Finally, here's someone who can help him find his way. "Excuse me," the stranger says, "can you tell me, how do you get to Carnegie Hall?" The hurrying musician pauses only long enough to say, "Practice, practice, practice." Musicians and athletes know better than just about anyone that all their work leads ultimately back to the same place. After the magnificently expressive performance, the flawless execution, the most unforgettable victory, the very next thing you do is practice. Having come to the end with a flourish, where you go is back to the beginning. Because no matter how the performance went, the next step is always practice. It intrigues me to think of going back to the beginning at this time of year as returning to the season of practice, practice, practice. There'll be a new round of athletic practice for sports teams over on the other side of Main Street and this side, and rehearsals for musicians and actors and dancers, and essays assigned to help dust off the writing skills after a long summer, and language tables for oiling up the conversational grammar. But if we take a big step back from all those specific regimens and wonder, what are we practicing for? Well, I have a sort of chaplain's office-y sort of answer to propose. It's all about practicing being human beings. And I think there aren't very many better places in the world to do that kind of practicing than this zip code. There are people whose roots are in countless cultures and countries living right next door. There are people sharpening their skills across the fullest spectrum of intellectual disciplines. There are usually students from at least 30 or more religious and spiritual traditions on campus in any given year. And one of the most important things about Williams as a place for learning and growing, with your help, students have brought their whole selves to live here, side by side, in this huge little place that we occupy together, so that they can practice being the human beings that they want to be, Practice being the human beings that they'll feel called to be over time here. Practice being the human beings that the world so desperately needs them to be. Being whole, full-fledged, compassionate, passionate, thoughtful, creative human beings doesn't just happen. How on earth are we going to get to the world we want to live in? Practice, practice, practice. I've been noticing lately that so many things about our lives in this place are like, you should pardon me for resorting here to my professional vocabulary, but like a spiritual practice. I don't mean that what begins here today will necessarily be an overtly spiritual journey for all students, though it might be for some. But I do mean that what goes on here over these years of living whole lives together will be about serving something bigger, something more dazzlingly good than anyone can fully imagine. And I do mean that what goes on here over these years of living together might from time to time give us just a glimpse of things that are hard to define and impossible to hold in your hand. Things like community, like purpose, like conviction, like commitment. I do mean that what goes on here involves a constant choice to be present, to be connected. It involves the spiritual practice of paying attention, the spiritual practice of compassion, the spiritual practice of deep listening and honest speaking, the spiritual practice, the hardest one of all, of changing your mind. My colleagues and I in the chaplain's office are working hard to be practicing human beings. So I hope we'll be good company for your daughters and sons as they practice. I hope you'll get to meet Father Gary and Rabbi Seth and Imam Sharif during your years of association with Williams. I know that sounds like another old joke. A priest and a rabbi and a minister and an imam walk into a student center. Experience the punchline, we say. Visit us in the chaplain's office. Yes, we spend time saying Mass and cooking Shabbat dinners and leading prayers and planning for celebrations of Eid al-Adha and Yom Kippur and Diwali and Bodhi Day, all of that. We go to each other's holidays. We study each other's sacred texts together, and we invite students to join us, even if they don't think they have a religious bone in their bodies. But we spend at least half of our time, just like all of these people do, just listening to them talk about what's happening to them. Mostly, I think we hope the students come to see us as companions in the practice of being human together. And we're not alone in this work, as you've already heard. And as you'll discover over these years, there are dozens and dozens of adults whose whole reason for being here and for feeling that it's such an incredible privilege to work here is because we're all working on practicing being human with your daughters and sons and cheering them on in their practice and applauding their often magnificent performances of their full humanity, heart and mind, body and spirit. I like to say that of all the great things about Williams, one of the greatest is also one of the simplest, that it's a virtual certainty that over the course of these years, every student will find at least one adult with whom they can be wholeheartedly and unabashedly, honestly, courageously themselves. At least one adult, and usually a handful, who really gets them, with whom they can study the practice of our humanity intelligently, compassionately, hopefully. And of course, part of their practice too is in being here for each other, calling each other into their humanity. Most students suffer a broken heart at least once while they're here. And it seems to be in the nature of this place that virtually every student helps to mend someone else's broken heart many times while they're here. We're all trying in every way we can to help them find their way to questions that will help them make meaning out of their education. Because an education doesn't just automatically come with meaning. And questions that will help them find a sense of vocation that's maybe a layer or two deeper than just finding a job, because a job doesn't necessarily come with a sense of vocation. And questions that will help them to spill their own high hopes out into the landscape of this world as flagrantly and joyfully as they can. We chaplains work especially closely with the Center for Learning in Action and the Davis Center because some of the best places to practice are out beyond the edges of this campus. I think right now we can all feel the leading edge of the question, what's going to become of this world? And we hope that your son or daughter will end up spending some time in the spiritual practice of studying lives other than their own. Because isn't practice the way to get the world we might hope this world is becoming? And doesn't the world seem to most need people who get it, that our best hope of understanding the mystery of ourselves is to labor tirelessly to understand the magnificence of others? And of course, it's not just the students who are going right now back to the beginning to start practicing again. You too, as their parents and brothers and sisters and beloved ones, you get to start afresh today too. Maybe it feels a little lost and disoriented on this particular stretch of the sidewalk right now. What does it mean to have a newly emerging young adult in the family? What does it mean to be a parent or a brother or a sister of someone who's in that huge little place in Massachusetts, honing the practice of their very particular humanity to such a high luster? How do you hold on while letting go? How do you hold their freedom and your hopes in the same heart? How do you get from here to commencement? Practice, practice, practice. So thank you for bringing them to this season for the spirited practice of being human. And thank you for the magnificence of the humanity that you have already so obviously instilled in them. Here we are, all again, back at another beginning. Wherever the journey leads from here, for you, for them, for us, may it be honest and lively and generous, and most of all, human. Safe travels home.